The silent invasion. The vast darkness of space stretched endlessly, filled with silent stars and distant galaxies. Among them, a fleet of alien warships moved undetected, their black hulls blending with the void. These ships belonged to the Xelarian Dominion, one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, and now their sights were set on Earth. The Xelarians had been observing humanity for years. They had studied Earth's broadcasts, intercepted signals, and watched as humans fought among themselves. The conclusion was simple: Earth was weak, divided, and technologically primitive. A species still struggling with wars, politics, and basic space travel could not possibly stand against the might of the Xelarian fleet. Commander Veyrak stood on the bridge of the largest warship, the Dominator. He gazed at the blue planet below, a look of amusement on his reptilian face. "Pathetic," he muttered. "They don't even have planetary defenses." His officers nodded in agreement. The invasion would be effortless. Unlike other conquests, this time the Xelarians had decided on a silent invasion. No grand announcements, no warning shots, just swift, calculated destruction. A few precise strikes on Earth's communication systems, military bases, and energy grids would leave the planet helpless. Then the Xelarians would land and take control. The humans would either submit or perish. Veyrak turned to his tactical officer, a thin, gray-skinned alien with glowing red eyes. "Deploy the stealth scouts. I want a final scan of their military capabilities before we strike." The officer nodded and sent out the command. Small, nearly invisible drones descended towards Earth's atmosphere, spreading out over major cities and military installations. They moved undetected, recording everything. But something was wrong. The scans showed something unexpected. Earth's military bases were not as defenseless as they had believed. Satellite images showed unusual energy readings beneath several locations. There were underground structures, shielded compartments, and unidentifiable technology that was not supposed to exist on this primitive world. Veyrak frowned. This is not what we expected." He turned to his science officer. "What are these readings?" The officer hesitated. "Unknown, Commander. Some of these energy signatures are unlike anything in our database. They do not match any known human technology." Veyrak narrowed his eyes. Could it be another alien race assisting them? The officer shook his head. "Negative. There is no evidence of extraterrestrial interference. Whatever this is, the humans built it themselves." For the first time in years, a feeling of unease crept into Veyrak's mind. How could a species that only recently discovered space travel hide something like this? Had they been deceived by Earth's primitive outward appearance? Back on Earth, inside a hidden military command center deep underground, humans were watching too. Colonel James Carter stood in front of a large screen, watching real-time feeds of the alien drones moving above the cities. His team of scientists and strategists monitored the situation closely. They had known for months that an attack was coming. The strange movements in deep space, the intercepted signals, everything pointed to an approaching enemy. Humanity had been underestimated, and that was their greatest advantage. Carter turned to his team. "Are the warships ready?" A young officer nodded. "Yes, sir. All stealth units are in position, awaiting your command." Carter's lips curled into a small, grim smile. The world thought Earth was defenseless, but that was the greatest lie humanity had ever told. Let the invaders come. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Humanity's hidden strength. The Xelarian fleet remained cloaked in the darkness of space, their warships drifting like silent predators above Earth. Commander Veyrak paced the command deck of the Dominator, his sharp claws clicking against the polished metal floor. The new energy readings had changed everything. Earth was supposed to be an easy conquest, but now doubt crept into his mind. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Koreth, watched him carefully. "Commander, what are your orders?" Veyrak stopped and stared at the planet below. "We proceed as planned." he said, though his voice carried a rare uncertainty. Perhaps these readings are nothing. Perhaps humans have only begun to experiment with new energy sources. Regardless, we are the Xelarian Dominion. No species has ever withstood our invasion. He turned to his tactical officer. Target their communication networks first. Cripple their satellites. We will strike before they have a chance to react. The order was given. High above Earth, invisible Xelarian ships adjusted their positions, preparing to unleash electromagnetic pulses that would disable the planet's defenses. But just as their weapons powered up, something happened. A disturbance rippled through space. It was subtle at first, a flicker of energy, a whisper in the cosmic silence. Then, without warning, dozens of massive human warships decloaked, their metallic hulls shimmering in the light of Earth's sun. Veyrak's eyes widened in disbelief. This was impossible. These ships, where did they come from? Korath shouted. The Xelarians had scanned Earth countless times. They had detected nothing but small orbital stations, outdated satellites, and a few primitive spacecraft. How had humanity hidden an entire war fleet? On Earth, deep beneath a classified military bunker, Colonel James Carter stood before a large command screen, watching the reaction of the alien invaders. His fingers tapped against the console as he relayed orders. Phase 1. Complete. His voice was calm, controlled. The bait had worked. For decades, humanity had played a careful game. While the world had appeared vulnerable to outside forces, the truth was far more dangerous. The real Earth's defenses had been built in the shadows, hidden beneath the surface, in deep space stations, and within cloaked warships that had been waiting for this exact moment. The Xelarians had thought they were the predators. They were wrong. Back on the Dominator, alarms blared across the ship. The Xelarian officers scrambled for control, but before they could react, humanity struck first. A single command was issued from Earth's military base: engage. From the darkness of space, Earth's warships roared to life. Missiles, railguns, and energy-based weaponry tore through the void, targeting the Xelarian fleet with terrifying accuracy. The alien ships, caught off guard, struggled to raise their shields. Some managed to evade, but others exploded into brilliant fireballs, their wreckage scattering across the stars. Veyrak's mind raced. How was this possible? How had they miscalculated so badly? He gritted his teeth. Regroup. We are not losing to a primitive species. But deep down, for the first time in his career, fear crept into his heart. This was not going to be the easy conquest he had imagined. This was war. First strike. Humanity fights back. The Xelarian fleet was in chaos. Explosions lit up the void as Earth's hidden warships tore through the invaders with brutal precision. This wasn't a desperate defense. This was an ambush. Humanity had known they were coming, had prepared for them. And now, the Xelarians were paying the price. Commander Veyrak gripped the edge of his command console, his reptilian eyes darting across the holographic battle display. Xelarian ships were being picked off one by one, their shields failing against Earth's relentless assault. It made no sense. These humans were supposed to be primitive. Korath roared. How are they doing this? A sharp warning blared across the bridge. One of the Xelarian dreadnoughts, the Tyrant's Claw, had been targeted by a human capital ship, a monstrous vessel that had appeared out of nowhere. Its dark, angular hull pulsed with energy as it fired a barrage of railgun slugs the size of small buildings. The Xelarian ship's shields flared under the impact, then collapsed. Brace for impact. Someone screamed. A split second later, the Tyrant's Claw detonated in a blinding fireball, sending debris careening through space. The blast rocked the Dominator, throwing officers to the ground. The Xelarian fleet had never faced destruction like this. Veyrak's mind raced. This wasn't just a surprise attack. This was military genius. Humanity had hidden its strength so well that the Xelarians had walked straight into a death trap. And the worst part, Humans weren't even fighting at full strength. The truth about humanity's fleet. Back on Earth, deep beneath a classified military facility, Colonel James Carter stood in the war room, arms crossed as he observed the battlefield. His expression was unreadable. A young officer turned to him. "Sir, should we deploy the second wave?" Carter didn't answer immediately. His eyes lingered on the screen, watching as Solarian ships scrambled to reposition. They were fast learners, but it was already too late. He finally spoke. "Not yet. Let them believe they still have a chance." The officer hesitated but nodded. Humanity had spent decades preparing for this moment. Their real strength hadn't even been revealed yet. Solarians strike back, but it's too late. On the bridge of the Dominator, Veyrak forced himself to stay calm. He had commanded invasions across countless star systems. He had crushed rebellions, wiped out civilizations. He would not be humiliated by these humans. "Regroup the fleet," he barked. "Concentrate fire on their capital ships." Solarian warships shifted formations, moving into tight battle clusters. Plasma turrets and high-yield disruptors began firing in perfect coordination. They wouldn't go down without a fight. A massive human warship, a battlecruiser named HFY Titan, was caught in the onslaught. Its shields flickered, struggling under the concentrated barrage. For a moment, it looked like the Solarians were turning the tide. But then, something unexpected happened. The Titan's engines flared, and instead of retreating, it charged forward, straight at the Solarian battle line. Veyrak's breath caught. What are they doing? Humanity's most terrifying weapon. A transmission suddenly came through. A human voice, calm and deadly. "This is Captain Elias Graves of the HSS Titan. You wanted to see Earth's true power." Veyrak's blood ran cold. The Titan's front hull split open, revealing a massive railgun cannon, larger than anything that Solarians had ever seen. Then, it fired. A glowing slug, traveling at nearly the speed of light, ripped through 3 Solarian ships in an instant. Their shields didn't even have time to register the impact. The vessels were torn apart, shattered into burning wreckage. Silence filled the Solarian command deck. Veyrak's claws dug into the console. "This isn't a battle," he muttered, realization hitting him like a physical blow. "This is a slaughter." The horror of what they had awakened. In the war room on Earth, Colonel Carter watched as the Solarian fleet began to break. His officer turned to him. "They're starting to retreat, sir. Shall we let them go?" Carter exhaled slowly. "No." The room went silent. The young officer hesitated. "Sir," Carter's expression hardened, "they came here expecting to conquer us. If we let them go now, they'll return with more ships, more firepower. We don't just fight wars. We end them." A new order was given. All ships, pursue and eliminate. Veyrak's eyes widened in horror as human warships advanced, hunting them down like prey. He had made a fatal mistake. Humanity had never been weak. They had only been waiting. And now, the Solarians would learn why Earth was a world that should never have been challenged. No mercy, humanity's final warning. Panic spread through the Solarian fleet like wildfire. They had come to conquer Earth. Now they were running for their lives. The once mighty invaders had been reduced to scattered remnants, desperately trying to flee. But the humans weren't letting them go. They were hunting them down. The Solarian retreat turns into a massacre. On the command deck of the Dominator, Commander Veyrak gritted his teeth, his claws sinking into the console. He watched in horror as human warships pursued and destroyed his remaining vessels. One by one, Solarian ships vanished in fire and wreckage. A nearby battlecruiser, the Fangs of Kor, tried to engage its warp drive, but just as it activated, boom! A human destroyer, moving faster than anything Veyrak had ever seen, launched a precision railgun strike straight into its engines. The Solarian ship shuddered violently before detonating, its fiery remains scattering into the void. Veyrak's stomach twisted. "This is impossible," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "Commander," Lieutenant Korath's voice trembled. "We must surrender. We cannot win this." Veyrak turned on him, fury in his reptilian eyes. "Xilarians do not surrender." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. This wasn't a war. It was extermination. A message from Earth. On Earth, Colonel James Carter stood in the war room, arms crossed, watching the battle unfold. His officers waited for his next order, but before he could speak, a transmission request from the Dominator appeared on his console. A Xilarian was asking to communicate. Carter exhaled. "Put it through." A holographic screen flickered to life, revealing Commander Veyrak. His once proud demeanor was gone, replaced with exhaustion and fear. Smoke filled the background of his bridge. His ship was damaged, barely holding together. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Veyrak did something unthinkable. He bowed his head. "This was a mistake," he admitted, his voice hollow. "We believed your species was weak, that you would fall like all the others." Carter's expression was unreadable. "You believed wrong." A tense silence followed. Then, Veyrak slowly raised his head. "Human, what are your terms?" Carter's next words sent a chill through the room. "There are no terms." Veyrak's eyes widened. "You mean to?" Carter leaned forward, his voice calm but filled with a terrifying certainty. "You didn't come here to negotiate, Commander. You came to destroy us. And now you expect mercy." Veyrak opened his mouth but found no words. Carter continued, his tone turning ice-cold. "Your fleet dies today. And if the Xilarian Dominion ever thinks about Earth again, you won't have a Dominion left." The transmission cut off. The final stand. On the Dominator, silence filled the command deck. Then, alarms blared. The humans were making their final push. Veyrak closed his eyes for a brief moment. He had spent his life believing in the Dominion's supremacy. But now he understood. Earth had never been helpless. They had only been waiting for a reason to fight. And now the Xilarians were the ones who needed to fear. He turned to his crew, his voice steady. "Prepare for battle. If we are to fall, we fall with honor." The final engagement began. Meanwhile, on Earth, Colonel Carter watched as the last of the Xilarian fleet was wiped from the battlefield. It was over. An officer turned to him. "Sir, shall we transmit a message to the Xilarian homeworld?" Carter's gaze didn't waver. "No." The officer hesitated. "Sir." Carter finally turned to face his team. "They'll hear the message soon enough." He looked back at the debris-strewn battlefield, at the wreckage of a once great armada, and at the human fleet standing victorious. Earth had made its statement. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. This was no longer a silent, hidden power. This was a warning. And the next time an empire thought Earth was weak, there wouldn't be anyone left to tell the story. The galaxy reacts. Fear of humanity spreads. The battle was over. The once mighty Xilarian invasion fleet had been wiped from existence. Their warships, once symbols of terror across the stars, now drifted through space as silent wreckage. Earth had not just defended itself. It had sent a message. And the galaxy had heard it. The Galactic Council's emergency summit. In the heart of the Andromeda cluster, the Galactic Council, the most powerful political entity in the known universe, held an emergency summit. Representatives from over 50 star nations had gathered in a vast, circular chamber. The air buzzed with tension as holographic projections displayed the wreckage of the Xilarian fleet orbiting Jupiter. At the center of the room stood High Chancellor Vorkeen, a towering Avenari diplomat with shimmering silver skin. His deep-set eyes glowed with unease as he addressed the assembly. "The Xilarian Dominion," Vorkeen said, his voice echoing, "has been crippled. Their fleet, the second largest in the known galaxy, was utterly eradicated. A hushed murmur rippled through the chamber. Vorkeen's gaze swept over the gathered leaders. This was not a battle. It was a massacre. And the ones responsible are the humans. Silence fell. The Council had long considered Earth an insignificant backwater world. Its people were thought to be weak, disorganized, and primitive compared to the great empires of the stars. They had been wrong. And now, every empire that had ever considered invading Earth was suddenly faced with a horrifying realization. Humanity was not just wrong. Humanity was unstoppable. The fear spreads. Across the galaxy, the news of the Xelarian defeat spread like wildfire. On the warlike Dravani homeworld, their High Warlord watched footage of the battle, his massive talons tapping nervously against his throne. "By the stars," he whispered, "what have the Xelarians unleashed?" In the vast libraries of the Aetherian scholars, ancient prophecies were being re-examined. "The sleeping giant has awoken," one elder murmured, "and it will not rest again." On the Xelarian homeworld, chaos erupted. Riots filled the streets. Their empire had never suffered such a defeat. Their people were screaming for answers, for vengeance, for survival. A desperate plan. In the ruins of the Xelarian capital, Supreme Overlord Xyrolus stood in his war chamber, his claws shaking. The Dominion was on the brink of collapse. His military elite stood before him, their eyes filled with fear. "What do we do?" One of them asked. "If humanity comes for us next." "They won't," Xyrolus snapped. The room fell silent. The Overlord took a slow breath. "We need an alliance. We need everyone." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the chamber. The Xelarians had always been the conquerors, the aggressors. Never before had they sought allies. But now, they had no choice. Xyrolus turned to his advisors, his voice dark and cold. "Send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them we propose a coalition." One of his ministers hesitated. "A coalition? Against who?" Xyrolus' eyes narrowed. "Against Earth." Meanwhile, on Earth, Colonel James Carter stood in the war room, watching as data streamed across the holographic display. Satellites had detected an unusual surge of activity across multiple star systems. "Sir," an officer said, approaching, "we've intercepted transmissions from Xelaria." Carter turned. "And?" The officer hesitated. "They're rallying the galaxy against us." A grim smile formed on Carter's lips. "So they finally understand." He turned to the room, eyes sharp with determination. "They came to destroy us," he said. "Now, they fear us." He let the words sink in. "They think uniting against us will save them." He exhaled slowly. "They have no idea what's coming." The Galactic War begins. Humanity versus the universe. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. An emergency alliance of over 50 star nations, united under one purpose: destroy Earth. They called it the Coalition of Order, a desperate attempt to contain what they now saw as the greatest threat to galactic stability. But in reality, it was a war born of fear. The largest armada in galactic history, above the burning skies of Xelaria Prime, fleets from across the universe gathered. Vast dreadnoughts, planet-cracking siege ships, and millions of warfighters assembled under a single banner. It was an armada unlike any before. In the war room of the Coalition flagship Eternal Dominion, Supreme Overlord Xyrolus stood at the head of a massive holographic map. The leaders of the Coalition watched in silence as he gestured toward a red dot. "Earth." Xyrolus' voice was cold. "We strike in full force. No warnings, no diplomacy." His reptilian eyes glowed with hatred. "This time, we wipe them from existence." Earth's response. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a secret military installation known only as Black Tower, Colonel James Carter and the leaders of Earth's defense forces watched and waited. A live feed displayed the approaching alien fleets. It was the single largest force ever assembled. Billions of soldiers, thousands of warships, a force large enough to eradicate entire civilizations. The room was silent as the magnitude of the threat settled over them. Then, Carter smirked. "Finally," he muttered, "they're taking us seriously." General Vasquez folded her arms. "That's a lot of firepower, Colonel." Carter nodded. "Yeah, but they made one mistake." The officers turned toward him. "They're bringing their entire fleet," he said. "Which means when we crush them." His eyes burned with quiet fury. "There will be no one left to stop us." The first strike. As the Coalition's massive armada entered the Sol system, alarms blared across Earth's defense networks. The war had begun. Aboard the Xilarian flagship, Supreme Overlord Cyrolus watched with satisfaction as the first wave of their planetary siege weapons locked onto Earth's surface. "Their defenses won't hold," one of his commanders assured him. But as they prepared to fire, Earth fired first. From the dark side of the moon, where no scanners had detected them, hundreds of human warships decloaked. Massive orbital railguns, hidden for years beneath the lunar surface, activated in unison. Then, boom! The first wave of the Coalition fleet exploded before it could even react. A fleet like no other. The humans didn't fight like any other species. While the Coalition relied on overwhelming numbers, humanity relied on precision. Hyper-accelerated railguns shredded through alien armor like paper. Stealth bombers emerged from the void, planting antimatter charges before vanishing again. Drones, AI-controlled warships, and cyber warfare systems disrupted enemy communications. For every one human ship lost, the Coalition lost 10. And as the battle raged on, something became terrifyingly clear. Earth was winning. The death of an empire. On board Eternal Dominion, Cyrolus watched in horror as his once mighty fleet was torn apart. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They are only one species." But even as he spoke, another Coalition warship exploded in front of him. His second-in-command, eyes wide with panic, turned to him. "Supreme Overlord, what do we do?" Cyrolus' claws tightened into a fist. "There is only one option left." He took a deep breath and issued one final order. "Burn Earth to ash." Every remaining Coalition ship turned its weapons toward the planet. Every last missile, laser, and kinetic weapon fired at once. A wave of destruction, powerful enough to obliterate an entire solar system, rushed toward Earth. The humans had fought bravely. But now, they would be annihilated. Earth's final secret. Deep inside Black Tower, Colonel Carter watched the incoming barrage with a calm expression. His officers panicked. "Sir, every orbital defense system is at maximum capacity. We can't stop all of it." Carter turned to General Vasquez. "Do it." Vasquez nodded and pressed a single button. Across the planet, massive underground silos opened. For years, Earth had hidden its true final weapon, Project Ragnarok. From the ground, thousands of energy pulses launched toward the incoming bombardment. But these were no ordinary weapons. They were gravitational warheads. The moment they detonated, they didn't just destroy the enemy firepower. They bent reality itself. The entire wave of destruction collapsed into a singularity. One by one, the Coalition's warships began to warp, twist, and disappear into nothingness. Within moments, the largest fleet in galactic history was gone. The end of the war. Silence. In the Galactic Council chambers, representatives from every empire stared at the live footage. Billions of their people had just vanished. Supreme Overlord Cyrolus, the leader of the once mighty Xilarian Dominion, was missing. His fleet, annihilated. Humanity had not only survived, it had won. Across the galaxy, a single message echoed from Earth. A warning. Never come here again. And the galaxy listened. For the first time in history, the universe feared humanity. Humanity's next move. the galaxy's new rulers. The war was over, but humanity's revenge had just begun. The greatest armada in galactic history had been wiped from existence. Entire empires had lost their fleets, their soldiers, and their leaders. And now, there was no one left to stop Earth. The aftermath of war. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The coalition of order was shattered. Their mightiest generals were gone. Their governments were in chaos. Their people were terrified. And at the center of it all, Earth. For centuries, the galaxy had mocked and ignored humanity. They had seen them as weak, primitive, and insignificant. Now, they saw the truth. Humans were the deadliest species to ever exist. In the Galactic Council chambers, what remained of the great civilizations gathered. Their leaders spoke in hushed tones, their voices filled with fear and uncertainty. "What do we do?" A Xilarian senator whispered. "We have nothing left to fight them with." A reptilian warlord clenched his claws. "Perhaps we surrender." Silence filled the chamber. Surrender. To humans. The thought was unthinkable. But what choice did they have? Then, the chamber doors slammed open, and humanity walked in. Earth's answer. Aboard the massive human dreadnought Eclipse, Colonel James Carter stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber, once a place of power, now felt small in his presence. No one spoke. No one dared to. Carter's voice was calm, almost amused. "A few months ago, your people thought Earth was nothing." He stepped forward, the sound of his boots echoing through the silent hall. "You thought we were weak. You thought we were helpless." His eyes darkened. "You thought you could destroy us." The council leaders lowered their heads. Carter leaned on the massive table between them. "And now, tell me." He smirked. "What do you think of humanity now?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The fear in their eyes said enough. Finally, the oldest member of the council, a frail of Lyran diplomat, spoke. "Tell you, what do you want from us?" he asked. Carter exhaled. "Good question." For a long time, the galaxy had been ruled by powerful alien civilizations. They had enslaved weaker species. They had controlled trade. They had dominated entire star systems. And they had tried to erase humanity. Now, it was Earth's turn to decide the fate of the galaxy. The new order. Humanity didn't demand conquest. They didn't ask for revenge. Instead, they did something no one expected. They offered a choice. Carter leaned forward. "You have two options. One, you accept Earth's leadership. The old ways are over. No more slavery. No more oppression. No more wars for greed. The galaxy will be ruled with justice and fairness. Two, you refuse, and you deal with us the hard way." The room was silent. The choice was obvious. One by one, the leaders bowed their heads in submission. And just like that, humanity ruled the stars. The future of the galaxy. A year later, the universe had transformed. The old empires had fallen. The Galactic Council was now under human protection. War was no longer decided by aliens. Only Earth had that power now. Human patrol fleets ensured peace, stopping warlords before they could rise. Advanced human technology lifted billions out of suffering. For the first time in history, the galaxy was stable. And the universe finally understood. Humanity was not just another civilization. They were something more. Something inevitable. Something unstoppable. And so, a new name spread across the stars. A name whispered with awe and fear. Earth, the galactic superpower. Humanity, the new overlords. And no one dared to challenge them again.